Hey everybody, welcome back. It's your girl, it's your friend, your sis. It's Camille. I'm host of the Speaker Podcast, and this is the podcast where innovators and critics connect. Be sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe. Be sure to follow us online. We're on Facebook at the Speaker Podcast. We're on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Camille.Essick. Y'all, my website is up, it's out, it's available. Subscribe right now and stay in the loop at CamilleEssick.com. And we're also on TikTok. And I would love to hear from you. So please send me an email at thespeakerpodcast@gmail.com. Without further ado, I have someone, I keep saying I love all my guests, I really do. But this guest here, y'all, we go way back to freshman year. And since that time, he is really just like a brother and friend, and our friendship has grown over the years, and he's doing so many things. He is a thespian, he's an artist, he's a poet, he's a dad, he's an activist there. And fellow writer from Middle Tennessee State University. My brother and friend Shawn Whitsell is back. Hey, Shawn.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Other than dealing with these crazy allergies, I'm really, really good. It's so good to see you. You look great.
Same to
And
you.
yeah, so since our last conversation, like kind of let the people know that are not familiar with you, like who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Shawn Whitsell. I am a actor and playwright, director, the overall theater artist, and I do some work in film as well. I also work with young people teaching creative writing and drama, and just an artist out here, making art, trying to make a difference with the art that I create, with the things that I write about and the things that I present to the public. Um, yeah, just trying to deal with social issues that I feel like are important and spark conversation, some insight, and hopefully bring about some change in people's lives.
Awesome. And now that you've mentioned the arts, that's one of the things I really want to hop into as we kick off tonight's conversation. And as you know, right now, you're very tapped into the culture and what's going on with us, particularly as Black and Brown people. I really want to get into the conversation as far as the importance of us as Black people taking control and controlling our own narrative. I know, and this is just me personally, there's been a lot of cookout invitations, and in doing so, it's really shifted some narratives, and historical facts are getting skewed and kind of washed out. So just you being in the arts, can you like share your perspective as far as the importance of as us as Black people making sure that we are maintaining and controlling our stories and telling our narratives?
Yeah, I believe wholeheartedly that for a person, father, mother, that your family is your first ministry. I believe that your parents are your first teachers. And as parents, and not just parents, but those of us who are uncles and aunts and older cousins, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're teaching young people about who we are, our history, where we come from, what we've been through. And I think about that as far as being an artist as well, and especially an artist who works with young people.
Mhm.
It's my responsibility. I feel to make sure that I'm educating and empowering. And we talk about narratives. We've seen a lot of movies. Some of them are good. Some of them are not so good about Black people, and those movies sometimes have like a white savior, or sometimes have or it's written by people who are not who don't share the experience, or controlled by people who don't share the experience. And I'm not saying that people, as artists, I'm not saying that we can't collaborate with all different types of people, because I do that.
Right.
I do think
Exactly.
I think it's important that we're creating content that's specifically from us,
Right.
so that we can teach our children, and we can control the images of us, because the images of us have not always been in our favor. And
Yeah.
so it's important to, like, you got people who are like content creators, you got people who are writers and directors out there making honest art and honest depictions of Black people that I think are.
Yeah. And how does that tie into, when selecting roles? Because a lot of times we hear other artists and actors, they talk about, they turned down this role because they did not feel comfortable with, um, the character or the storyline. And so being selective, like when you think of Denzel Washington, he's very strategic and cognizant of the roles that he select. Or if you look at Angela Bassett, how she's very cognizant and selective as far as the roles she chooses. So in your perspective, what are your thoughts on just you coming up in the role in the world of theater arts and acting? How important is it to make sure that you are being mindful and thoughtful of the roles that you choose and the roles that you play?
Yeah, that's a great question because I was just actually talking about Denzel the other day, and I've
Mhm.
seen plenty of his interviews, and I know what his standard is, and that's something
Right.
that I love and appreciate. As an artist, I love to play all different types of characters, but I think it's important to show a range, right? A lot of
Yeah.
times they want to put you in drug dealer number one, drug dealer number two, or whatever.
Or a
And so,
dress, we're still battling that narrative of putting black men in dresses.
yeah, and so I think it's important for us to be able um, to show because white actors get to do they get to do a wide array of things. They get to do a broad range of things, and then sometimes black actors are like pigeonholed into this one thing or this one thing.
Yes.
And I think that as we create our own projects, we're able to show the full scope of our humanity, and we're able to give kids those. We're able to show those black heroes, right?
Right.
That we don't get enough of, in my opinion, right? And so
Yeah.
things have gotten better, but I think it's important that we're able to show a range of our own humanity.
Yeah, I really appreciate and when you were talking, I immediately thought about, Chadwick Boseman and where he was going in the world of art, right, as far as an actor. And it to me and I could be wrong, but it seems like since he's died, it seems like Hollywood has been trying to find another Chadwick Boseman to kind of fill his space, but I feel like his space was so big, even though we've seen even with the controversy with, Jonathan Majors or we see Michael B. Jordan, it's only like they only allow 1 or 2 of us in the space, and then if they let that one in, it's like that's the guy. Like, you only see the rotation of those 1 or 2 people, and so when you look at, there was Denzel, but before him, it was Wesley, or if it was Sidney Poitier, and so each generation has that guy, but it's like, why can we not I think we're starting to see a little bit of it now more when we see, like, Idris Elba, things like that, but as far as roles and opening up that space for Black men, it's very tight.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's interesting that you mentioned Chadwick because Chadwick was an amazing artist. He
Yeah,
wasn't just an actor; he was an artist, and he comes from the theater.
yeah,
And theater is great training, and so some of the performances that he delivered were just masterful.
yeah,
And I want to see more of that. I want to see roles where black men and black women, black actors can really stretch and really show their chops. And I think that's
mhm,
what our kids need to see too. Our kids need to see those types of performances because I feel like they really showcase our humanity, and that's
yeah,
what I loved about
yeah.
Chadwick. Yeah,
And with him, I know, of course, we talk about Black Panther or Marshall or Get On Up or 21 Bridges, but he had a lot of what I call other small screen films that were amazing, like Message from the King and movies like that, that of course maybe they didn't do the big office numbers, but just watching how he showed up on the screen and like you said, the humanity. And in every role I've seen him play, there was like when you see Felicia Rashad, there's like a regalness about her and there was a regalness about him, whatever he did. And so going for now, when we see people like John Boyega, or I can't remember his name, the guy from Snowfall, and which is another conversation as far as British actors taking American roles and that conversation. And what are your thoughts on that as far as now we're seeing an influx of British actors or even um when we see like I won't say Bollywood, but it's like the African version of Bollywood, like you see on Netflix, that's growing too. So what are your thoughts as far as I want to say invasion, but just the rise of British actors in American roles?
I have sometimes you don't know they're British until like you watch an actor and
Yeah,
they have nailed this American accent, and then you're like
yes.
blown away when you find out that they're not from America.
Yeah, that's how I felt about Idris Elba for the longest. I didn't, I was like, "What?" Or, John Boyega, just other people because you don't know that they're British until you hear them talk, and it's like they nail the accents and you don't realize, that they are, so
Yeah. For me personally, I don't have a personal issue with it.
yeah,
I see myself as like a global citizen,
yeah,
and I see that like the world is bigger than just the country that we live in, and so I can, if they do some really intense training over there and they really prepare their actors over in London, and then they come over here and they're able to find success. I don't have any particular issue with it, but I do understand the other side where, especially, I know, I think Samuel L. Jackson, and I've heard other actors who have like expressed, some reservations about
yeah.
disappointment about British actors in certain roles. So, I mean, I think it's a conversation that we could need to continue to have,
Mhm.
and maybe there's a way where we can find some balance and find some harmony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just to see how in those roles, people that are not from America, how they view Americans and how that plays out on the screen. Like when I watched, I don't know if you watched, but I love like Power BMF, and there was a season where the character, um, I forget his name, but they thought he was dead, and then we find out the next season he's not, and um, off camera I guess someone was filming or whatever, and, like, this whole time, we didn't know he was British, and it was, like, a thing, like, he's a British actor, but it just goes to show, like, how impactful it is as far as how they, come into our country, they're observing our culture, our narratives, as far as Black people and how it shows up on screen. I don't know if you remember the movie Black and Blue with Tyrese? The woman in the movie where she was the cop and she witnessed something corrupt. She had her body camera on and they were trying to kill her. Like she's British, but I've seen her in other films, but didn't I realize that she was. So I think it's very interesting that we are getting another crop. I feel like it's another crop of talent. But then, like you said, American actors expressing their dissension as far as it's hard enough to get work here. And then we have another group of people coming in and like you said before, with non-Black actors, they're more open to grab roles, but for us, it's kind of like a bottleneck situation, so
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just shows that there needs to be more work for Black actors.
mhm.
And I'm glad to see that that's more work is being created with like Issa Rae and Ava
Yeah.
DuVernay. Um,
At 50 now, he's starting his own studio. This past week, he visited Tyler Perry at his studios, which I think is a great mentorship situation, because we've seen what Tyler Perry has done as far as creating the largest film production, company period. And so now other independent artists are using him as the North Star, Black or white, as far as, hey, if he did this, I can do that too. And so to see that and creating spaces. So that next point goes to ownership. Even though, you're coming up as a playwright, can you speak to other up and coming artists as far as the importance of ownership as and not waiting until you've made it, but starting now at this level with ownership of your work?
yeah, I love what Tyler Perry has done by creating his own. He just like blazed his own path, right?
Yeah,
He did it his way. People may not like all of his content, or maybe some people don't like any of his content. But
right.
I love his independence. I love that he didn't feel like he had to go the Hollywood system. He got to create his own rules and
Yeah.
can empower himself and empower other people. And so I think that even if that's not your particular goal, is to have a huge studio or anything like that, what you can get from someone like Tyler Perry is that he just did it himself. He started with his plays, and then he transitioned to film. Issa Rae, she's someone that I think is extremely dope in terms of just creating. your own content, and she did.
Mhm.
She went from her like web series into
Yeah. What was it? Awkward Black Girl?
yeah, Adventures of an Awkward Black Girl. Yeah,
Yes.
so yeah, I think it just really it comes down to writing your own materials, creating your own content. But there's so much power in the pen.
Mhm.
And I know I say pen because I'm old school, but
Yes.
it's the laptop or your phone or whatever. But there's so much power in the word, in the written word, and
Yeah.
you can take an idea and you can flesh it out on your laptop, or if you're old school and you want to get a piece of paper and a pen, you could do it that way, and you can flesh out this idea that was in your mind and turn it into something, right, and make it a living, breathing thing. And you can
Yeah.
invite your friends and collaborators to join in with you, and you can create something magical.
That's awesome. And just going forward as we dive deeper into this conversation, thank you everyone. If you have not done so, please tag a friend, like, comment, and share. We're having a really good conversation here with my brother and friend, Shawn Whitsell. As we get deeper into this conversation outside of arts, now you're also an activist there in Tennessee. So in what areas, I know you've done protests. So for those that are not familiar, I met Shawn freshman year of college and we were just fast friends there at MTSU, and
Tell
since
them what year that was.
97! Oh my gosh.
1997. Yep.
Yeah, y'all are trying to recreate the '90s, baby, we were there, okay? We
Absolutely.
are '90s babies to the fullest, and, but we look
I,
good.
hey,
What they say, "Black don't crack."
absolutely.
Yes, but since then, Shawn, he's a dad, he's an activist, he's an actor, but he's really become a voice there in Nashville and Middle Tennessee area, and he's gotten a lot of recognition. So, Shawn, can you give us a little more background as far as your role as an activist in Tennessee, in the Middle Tennessee area, and just what's happening there, and as we get deeper into the conversation?
Yeah, so activism for me has been something that I feel like has always been a part of me in some way. Even as a kid, before I came to
Yeah.
Tennessee, I just always felt I was always attracted to those stories um, of activism, of advocacy, of perseverance, and pushing through oppression to come out on the other side. So always very aware of what our ancestors had done to get me to the point, or get us to the point where we are, and then also aware of the work that still needed to be done. So I moved through this world understanding that there is a responsibility upon me to make this world, to leave it better than I found it. And
Yeah.
so I try to do that with through the arts, because I, like I said earlier, I address issues that I think are important so that we can talk about them, so that people can reflect on themselves and their own lives and think about how they can be better as individuals, and
Mhm.
what work we can do as a collective to make this world better. But even beyond the arts, just as someone who loves my community and someone who loves people, and believes in the rights, and that we all should have, and understand what it takes for us all to be healthy and whole. And so it's important for me to do whatever work necessary to make sure that we have those things, or at least try to contribute in my own small way. So
Mhm.
whether that's being at a protest or some sort of direct action, a rally, or like sitting in somewhere, or having conversations, or I serve on the community review board, which we are formerly community oversight board, which was created by the people of Nashville, who voted for this board to be created, to do police oversight. Because
Wasn't that out of the Daniel Hambrick case?
absolutely,
Yes.
yeah. Um, so um, so that came, out of those controversy, the controversial, killing of um, Daniel Hambrick, and so um, that was created. I serve on that board. I've been on that board for 4 years.
Mhm.
We went from the community oversight board um, to the community review board, because the Tennessee legislature abolished oversight boards. Uh,
Mhm.
so they took away some of our power, but we still exist, still out there, just trying to make sure the people of Nashville feel heard and feel safe. Um, and if there are any issues of police misconduct, we're making trying to make sure that's dealt with properly.
Yes, and as we touch on that conversation, we've seen things like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, my sorority sister, Sandra Bland, the list goes on. Tamir Rice, he just had a birthday a couple
Yeah,
days ago. Excuse me, Mike Brown, um, just Ahmaud Arbery, it's just Sean Bell. That was the first one I remember. Like we were
mhm.
in middle school when that happened to now. And to have technology and we have more education, we have more access to everything. And someone made the comment that it hasn't changed. And it's not that it's getting worse. It's just now that we have the technology to actually document it and record it. And so you as a parent, what are you having to say as a father, raising a child in this construct of being mindful, having these talks, as he grows up, as your daughter grows up, your kids grow up, how is this for you as a parent, having a conversation with a child when they may not understand, well, dad, that's just my friend, it's cool, but you're having to do like these big picture conversations.
Yeah. So, and you really, when you become a parent, you really start to those things that your parents imparted on you. If you didn't get them growing up, you start to get those lessons, those things. You start to realize that once you have kids and you understand a little bit better
Right.
where your parents were coming from. Um, my daughter's 17. She just graduated high school. She is driving, and
What?
she's driving me crazy too.
Oh
But
my gosh.
she's great. But yeah, just her being out in the world because we tend to put this focus on black men when it comes to dealing with the police, but black women go through it as well. You just mentioned Sandra Bland. I think that's so important that we don't leave black women out of the narrative because
Right.
black women have these encounters with police as well. So for me, it's important. I've always try to give her the 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 real. I always try to give her the truth, and I've did my best to educate her about black people's journey in this country. And
Mhm.
so, even when she was very little, we talked about things that were age appropriate. But um, so I just gave her nuggets and nuggets and breadcrumbs along the way.
Right.
So now that she's arriving at the steps of adulthood right now, I think she's aware. She is. But kids are kids, right? So they're not going
Yeah.
to always have their antennas up. So it's scary, thinking about your kids out in the world, um, especially a daughter, because you deal with not just the aspect of racism or even
Yeah.
that you're dealing with, like, you're dealing with sexism, you're dealing with
Oh, yeah. Then colorism, being a chocolate girl and
absolutely,
dealing with,
absolutely.
that's a conversation too, and we can touch on that too, like, how is that for you as a dad, raising a chocolate girl in this world? I know too as a brown skin girl, things I've had to endure, hearing things like, "Oh, you're cute to be a, dark girl," or, being shocked like, "Oh, I'm dark-skinned girl, but I have long hair." So it's like, "Well, what do you mix with?" It's like, "Nothing." Like brown girls can't have long hair.
Mhm.
So, what are those conversations like for you with her?
We have not had much conversation about colorism, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
I've always just expressed to her how beautiful she is.
that's good.
I've
Yeah.
done that her entire life. And so for me, that's just me being a father, because I do think my child is beautiful, but I'm, intentional about giving her images of black people in the books that I bought her,
Mhm.
in the movies that I took her to see. I just make sure she saw black people of all different shades, all different hair textures, and just surrounded her with that pride of being a young black woman.
That's
That's
good.
what I've tried to do. We haven't talked much about colorism. She
Mhm.
hasn't, you know, she hasn't ever said anything to me. And you know what? That makes me think maybe that's a question I should ask her. But
Yeah, I would say just because growing up, now I'm a woman, but as a little girl, that's something I internalized. I didn't bring it up, but I felt it
mhm,
a lot.
yeah,
And I didn't realize how much it was impacting me until I started become older. And so when I was in the Navy, I got stationed in California, but before I got my orders, one of my shipmates, we were having a conversation, and I had never been in California before, and I asked her, and she's black girl too, and I was like, "So, what is it like in California, as a black woman?" And like most military people were very not to be rude, we're just very direct, we're very honest.
mhm,
And she was like, "I'm gonna be honest with you." She was like, "Colorism is a big thing out there. It's about at that time we called the Kardashian look, like olive skin, dark hair, Hispanic or biracial, ambiguously black, and then it went from there. And then if you were black woman and then light, then brown skin, then dark." And so she was like, "That's just how Cali is." And when I got out there, very very quickly, I saw what she was saying. Like it is California is very color struck. And I think being from Tennessee, being a Southern girl, I felt it. And of course, it was always like the light skin, dark skin thing, especially in the South. But it was like another level of that going to California. And it was like, oh, okay, you know. But I think because I was sure of myself, but I think without that, it could have been worse. But like, yeah,
yeah,
um, especially, being in the military and seeing how I was treated as a black woman in Europe or the Middle East, where I was loved and appreciated, celebrated, and then certain parts of the United States, how that played out. It was very interesting. So, yeah, I would say just as a brown skinned woman, please have that conversation with her and just little nuances that um just being black, but then reducing that to colorism, microaggressions that she may not pick up on immediately. And
absolutely.
then um also I experienced a lot of that when I started getting into makeup and trying to find my shade.
Mhm,
And now it's a lot better, when you see people like Queen Latifah that had the Queen collection or Rihanna with her brands. But for a long time, being a chemist and trying to figure out how can I mix and match my makeup for me and just other things. So yeah, I think that would be a good conversation to have, especially once she gets into dating and a lot of this red pill, blue pill conversation going on as a dad, and then the father of a black daughter. I think those are some conversations as she's getting out of her teens and into her 20s and 30s, like reinforcing those talks with her, schooling her on some things, maybe teaching her some nuances and how to handle herself in those conversations, and not to say it's gonna prevent this thing, but it would definitely kinda buffer the blow, so
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great advice. And she and I have really great conversations. And I think she's like what you said. She's a confident kid, and
yeah,
I'm thankful for that. Highly intelligent, very talented, and surrounded by love and support.
mhm,
But yeah, she's gonna be going beyond our little small town that she grew up in, and when she something may not be much of a problem in her little bubble, but
mhm,
as you go further and out into the world, like you talked about, like exploring different parts of the world, she might get different reactions, and
yeah.
something that she needs to be prepared for.
Yeah, and one thing I will add on before we move on, just even now as an adult, women that I revered, that I've experienced some disappointments now with the rise of plastic surgery and these BBLs, and women that I've seen that I was like, "Oh man, she's beautiful brown skin," but then watching them over the years, skin bleaching and the nose jobs and the lip injections and the fillers, to the point now it's like subtle message that I'm prettier if I'm lighter, or if my nose is not as wide. And I see this and I'm like, "Man, like, what message," even though I know who I am, but if I was a little girl looking up to, certain celebrities, particularly brown skinned Black women now, it would be a little disheartening to witness that, and we see it in real time with social media where people literally reveal their new face every 6 weeks to a year, and if you look at certain celebrities and do a montage of their photos from, like, 90s, 2000s to now, it's like, what? So, yeah, I would definitely talk to her about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So, going we this conversation is going by so quickly.
Yeah.
Um, as we look like now we are in 2024 and we are seeing a lot of what I call this 90s resurgence. And we are kind of talking about this offline before we started
Mhm.
as far as I don't think people really understand the vibe and the feeling and just the era of the 90s. And it's hilarious to me to see individuals trying to recreate the time now, but to actually be there, we've witnessed a lot of cultural changes. Like we witnessed a rise in fall of Tupac. Like we remember when we like, who is Tupac? That's a different name to
Mhm.
when he died or Biggie. Like, so for you, now that we're I'm not gonna say our age, but we are here. We are here,
Yes,
okay?
yes,
And
absolutely.
now, like looking back on it now, what is your take on everything of this, I guess, 90s renaissance?
You know what? Today, I was talking to someone. We were talking to some young people,
Mhm.
and we were telling them how you never know you're in the good times until they have passed, right?
Mm,
Because we were in the 90s, and man, in the 90s, the music was so good. There were a variety of artists. Nobody really sound the same. Like 90s R&B does have a particular sound. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. Like, but within that sound, you had like different types of voices and vibes, and I felt like 90s hip hop was more diverse than what we see now. And
yeah.
so it was just a good time. There was no social media, so people are not glued to their phones.
No, we were outside. Like right now, we would have been outside.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, we were kicking it, we
yeah,
in the 90s, and just like there were great TV shows, it was just a really good time. So when when I was actually during the 90s, I used to be obsessed with the 70s, right? So
right.
I used to look back at because I lived through the 80s, I lived through the 90s, but like when I was a kid, I was obsessed with the 70s because I
Okay.
loved to see like I love watching Jackson 5 clips and stuff like that. But so I feel like that's what's happening with kids these days. They're like attracted to a time that something that was before their time. So they're looking at the 90s
Like
and
we looked at the 70s.
like we looked at the 70s,
Gotcha.
the 60s. And so yeah, they're sampling songs that came from the 90s. They're sampling like Escape and SWV
Yes.
and every chance they're even some of the clothing, some of the fashion has come back. So
Bucket hats, the shorts, the screen tees. We used to wear the backpacks across our shoulders, like, yeah, definitely.
yep. So it's cool. I think it's like it's them longing for a time that they've heard about. I had someone say, "Man, I wish the '90s looked so lit. I wish I was born at that time." And I was like, "It
It
was.
was a time.
It
I
was."
think also too with social media because this generation with having the cell phone in their hand, they see so much. It's like shoved in their face. And not to say things were not happening in the 90s,
Right.
but there was like because we didn't have social media, there was a bubble of wholesomeness. Like right now, the sun is still technically out. If we were a kid, we would be outside playing still.
Mhm.
And if you were a teenager and had a car, all the cool guys would be at the car wash hanging out, and just it was just different. So
Yeah,
I totally get it. And then as far as the music, like Drew Hill did not sound like Boys to Men, and
absolutely.
SWV did not sound like Jade, and like you said, everyone had their own style, and then you had De La Soul, but they were not like Kid and Play.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
you had Big Daddy Kane did not sound like LL Cool J.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it definitely was a vibe, and I appreciate the resurgence of it, and it takes me back, and even now with TV, of course, I'll watch Power or something like that, but honestly, I find myself watching 90s sitcoms like Girlfriends, and I watch Living Single and episodes of Martin, or I don't know if you remember In the House with LL Cool J,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then they just recently loaded, Eve. She had a show on, and it's
Yeah.
on Tubi. Like, I find myself watching those shows because the fashion, the music, even, like, old episodes of, like, New York Undercover. People don't understand, like, New York Undercover
It was a movement. It was a moment, man.
it
New
was
York
a
people,
moment.
you couldn't wait for like New York Undercover to come on. Like it was
Yeah,
always it was that was a show, man. That was like
yeah.
yeah.
It was a time to be had, and then thinking about college during that era, it was all good. So, imagine, like, if we were in the '90s with cell phones, like,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So
so it's just different. But no, this has been a really good conversation. So before we wrap things up, do you have any like gems or nuggets or takeaways that you would like to leave with the listeners and viewers? Because I definitely want to bring you back. And it's also just good just to sit down and chat with an old friend. So and then also where can people connect with you on social media?
yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. My Instagram is Shawn underscore Whitsell. My Twitter is Shawn Whitsell all together. And then I'm also on Facebook, so you can find me. Google me, I'll come up. And so you can find me on social media. And in terms of gyms, I would say I'm trying to think of what I said the last time I was on your podcast. I
Oh,
don't exactly remember, um, but I'll say two things because one of these I might have already said. Make your work contagious. So
mm,
whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're creating content, whether you are being an activist, whether you are um, whatever it is that you're doing, um, make the work contagious. Inspire people to want to do whatever it is that they want to do in life. Right? Spread it out. Um, Spread out that inspiration. So I'll say that, and then I'll say um, whatever it is that you want to do, just do it. And what I mean by that is, I have someone that I know, and he is a dreamer, and he has vision and ideas, but he doesn't act on them.
mm,
And so I would just encourage people, whatever it is that you're dreaming of, it doesn't have to be something grand. It doesn't have to be. It could be something small. But whatever it is that you're dreaming of, whatever's tugging at you at night, whatever your heart is set on doing, do it.
yeah,
Start taking those baby steps to make it happen. And so that's what I encourage people. Whatever it is that your dream is, you have what it takes to make it happen. Just get out there and do it.
that's good. I like that. That blessed me.
Bless me too. Bless me
Was
too.
really good. I call it those little downloads from God, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's really good. So, sit tight. But everyone, thank you again for tapping in. Join us. We're gonna take a little summer break. We'll be back after the 4th of July. And I will release our next guest lineup. Go to my website at CamilleEssick.com, and that way you can send the loop, but you have to subscribe first. So do that. Also follow me on Facebook at the Speaker Podcast, on YouTube as we continue to to build our channel. I'm also on TikTok, and I would love to hear from you. Please shoot me an email at thespeakerpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you, Shawn. I hope everyone got something from this conversation, whether you're catching this now or the replay later. Y'all be blessed. This is the Speaker Podcast, the podcast where innovators and critics connect. Good night. Bye.
Bye.